More light to the side, no.
And we're live. I don't think anyone's actually here yet, but hey, Lemnon, what's up? Is that you? Okay. My phone was dinging for strange reasons the other day. I wasn't even sure what notifications I was getting or what was dinging. I didn't know if that was mine. So I figured out how to download software to hopefully get better clarity. So I think we should now actually be in greater focus while I'm painting. I also zoomed in a little bit more. So I think we should be good. So the question tonight is, this wasn't really necessarily planning to stream tonight, but I figured since I was going to be painting anyway, I might as well turn the camera on and see how the zoom was. Should I keep working on the model I was working on last Sunday, or save that for the Sunday stream I have planned later? Or work on the Showgirls models, which is a project I really need to finish. So I'm thinking I might actually work on Showgirls tonight and get back to cool. So are you a DM, Limnan? And do you then paint all your group's models for them? I tend to be a DM for all the groups that I RPG with. Nobody else wants to DM on my friends. So I always end up being the DM, and then of course none of them really want to paint their models. So then if I want painted models in my campaigns, I end up painting their models for them a lot of times. Are you voting for me going back and continuing to work on Allie? Or should I work on Showgirls models tonight? All right, since you're the only one in chat, your wish is my command. Give me a second while I swap out one of my things. So what kind of campaign are you running right now, Lemnon? Hey, Pack Team, what's up? So you got here about 2 minutes too late to help vote for what we're working on tonight. It's between Showgirls or continuing the skin tutorial on Ally. Animated film by Pixar. Yeah, you do what you have to, man. So, where we left off, I had done the base coat on her, and we had stained the base coat with the P3 Flesh Wash, just to add a little extra color to the base. I had mixed up 2 different highlight layers, start building up some of the layers working up to the highlight. And so now I'm going to go straight pale flesh. Yeah, straight pale flesh will work. So right now you'll see we've got some transitions working in from the shadows to the highlights. You see some up near her shoulders, transition from underneath her arms to the outsides of the arms. We've got some shadows in her face. But the skin is very, very pale and washed out. She looks, I don't know, kind of creepy at the moment. But as I said last time, eventually what we'll do is we'll end up with doing some layers to start toning the skin and get the tone we want. But right now we're kind of building up the underneath layers so we get highlights and shadows and all the stuff in the places that we need. And I'm going to keep thinking about if I want to do tattoos on her, and if so, what kind of tattoos she would have. It'd be cool if I don't think that the actress, Mila, I don't think she has any arm tattoos and stuff in the movies. If she did, that would be cool. Try to actually replicate those. So as this last time, since we're doing highlights, we're always going to be moving our brush in the direction of the high points that we want to accentuate. We're pulling the pigment towards where we want it. It's going to create more translucency near where we're transitioning from one color to the other. And then it's going to be more solid colored where we want it to be solid colored. Kind of made a little bit of a mistake in driving home from work today. I decided to stop for some coffee and got a rather large coffee. So I got quite a bit of caffeine coursing through my system right now. My hands are a little shakier than usual. Good thing I'm not trying to do freehand tonight. Am I classically trained in any art? Nope. I mean, growing up, I just did my own kind of art stuff. I did a lot of drawing and things like that, but it wasn't any kind of formal training. All the things I learned about miniature painting, I just learned by trial and error or absorbing from hanging out with other painters. And just challenging myself. Just try new things. See what worked, what didn't. Switch it up next time. Just try to be better. My day job. I work for a university. I do research in math education. So I study how students learn mathematics. I study teachers and how teachers learn to be better mathematicians and math educators. We look at what it takes to help teachers transition from kind of a crappy lecture style instruction to something that actually engages students and helps them reflect on their own understanding so that they build a more meaningful understanding of mathematics. I write and edit curriculum. I do professional development for teachers that are in the classroom right now. If you hear some licking noises, my cat is cleaning on the table here on the other end, and he's somewhat close to the microphone, so I apologize if you hear some rather slobbery noises at the moment. He's actually shaking the camera too. Oh, he just huffed at me. He's mad at me. I poked him with my paintbrush. Where did the moniker gorilla with the brush or gorilla come from for this? So I'll give you the long version since we have time. So, back when I first started painting, there really wasn't much in the way of internet or social media or anything like that. And, most of the people who knew me didn't really know me by name. It was mostly just by seeing models that they recognized, stuff that had been published in White Dwarf, Golden Demon entries that I had won with and things like that. When I finally did start to participate in online things, like posting pictures of my own online, not just on my own personal Facebook page and things, I mainly was just doing it on the Privateer Press forums because that was the game I was playing a lot at the moment. Well, for actually a relatively long period of time, about 5 or 6 years. And for that, I had picked I'd called myself Arizona Troll. being from Arizona and the fact that I played Troll Bloods and I loved the faction. I loved their fluff, their backstory. I loved the models. So it kind of fit. I became somewhat relatively well known within the game, the War Machine and Hordes game. I think my forum where I posted all my painted models of Troll Bloods had something like 130,000 views by the time they switched editions and kind of revamped all of their forums, and then I got out of the game. And when I was kind of thinking of rebranding, because I didn't really necessarily want to be associated with just Troll Bloods anymore, or even just the state of Arizona, I wanted something that was more my own. I was thinking about what I could do that would be memorable for people who were seeing my work. So I kind of wanted like a name that was memorable, something that I could, create a logo for that would be memorable. I could put it on my pictures of my models, and so when people saw the painted pictures, they're like, wait, I've seen that gorilla before. That kind of idea. I just kind of hit on the name Gorilla with a brush. I pictured in my head Coco the gorilla, who was kind of famous. She learned sign language and had her own cat, and so people did a lot of scientific tests on ape intelligence by studying Coco. And one of the things that she liked to do was paint, and it's kind of a famous picture of her like with a paintbrush in hand, just painting on a canvas, and it's not very good. But obviously, she's a gorilla. She's not she's not a trained artist or anything, but I just pictured that, and I thought it was kind of funny, sort of a self-deprecating name, but something that had an interesting image that was conjured up. So I just went with that. And I didn't have the logo to start with. I was actually just using that picture of Coco as my my profile pics for all the Facebook page I created and the Twitter account I created. But that was just temporary till I could figure out what I wanted to do, and I ended up finding this cartoonist. I think he was from India, and I hired him to draw my logo. I wanted something that was my own, something that was copyrighted to me and that I had full privileges to use. So I had him draw that for me, and that's the story. So it's just meant to be fun, meant to be memorable, so people who see it and then see it again, something sticks in their mind. It's supposed to be fun. Indicate that I don't really take all of this all too seriously. Just have fun. Well, thanks for stopping by, man. I really appreciate it. Have a good night. Take care. Think of another 19 questions or 18 questions to ask me for the next stream, all right? Fill up your 20 questions. Yeah, I'll post pictures of where she stands when I'm done. And this should be archiving, so you should be able to go back and watch it again later if you so choose. At some point, I've been trying to post these on YouTube also, so can always check there. Sweet, welcome back. I'm going to add a bit of white to this. And this will probably be the last highlights I do. I'm going to go to a finer detail brush for this because I'm not going to cover nearly as much area for this final pass. Here's my dilemma now, actually. If I want to do tattoos, I should start to think about putting them on before I start doing my shading. So most of the paints that I use nowadays are scale 75s paints, with a few exceptions. Not a huge fan of their white, especially the white in their classic line. I prefer P3, the Privateer Press white, the Moro white. I've heard really good things about War Colors white, but I just have never tried it. The GW stuff is great. I use GW paints exclusively probably for, 15 years. I started using P3s a little bit more in recent history, and just the last year and a half here I've been switching over to P3 paints. I'm sorry, not P3, scale 75. There's just something about them that I really like that just really kind of match with the things that I want to be working on right now. Which is that they have pretty good coverage when you want them to have pretty good coverage. You can thin them down and turn them into a glaze really, really easily. So you can basically kind of glaze and tone with any of the colors that you want. I really like the colors they have. The pigments in them just look really nice. So yeah, I kind of forced myself. The beginning of last year was just a growing opportunity. I kind of put away all my other paints and just went to scale 75 to force myself to learn, because paints all behave a little differently and they're all good for little different things. And I knew that scale 75 in particular had a reputation for being quite different from other paints. They just don't behave quite the same way. So I thought, I'm going to spend this whole year forcing myself to just use scale 75 paints and just, see where it takes me, learn new things. And I found I just really liked them, so I'm still on that kick right now. In fact, I just ordered they have a third set of paints now. So they have their classic line, just their scale 75 colors. They also have a fantasy and games line, which have a little bit more classic fantasy tones to them. Their greens are a little bit more fantasy greens and their blues are a little bit more fantasy blues rather than kind of realistic colors. But they have a third line out now called Warfront, I believe. And those were designed for the kind of historical models that they were producing. So they're meant to have the colors to allow you to paint World War II uniforms, tanks, vehicles, things like that. So I'm hoping they have some really nice greens and browns. Those are, if I had to complain at all about the colors in the normal scale 75 stuff in the fantasy and games lines, it would be that I don't love the selection of browns and greens. Ardennes green is really awesome. So this is my favorite of the greens that they have. Other than this, I just don't love a lot of their other greens. They have ones kind of like a gray green. I mean, nice for like little things you might be working on, but in terms of having a nice color to, say, paint a green dress or paint orc flesh or something like that, I end up finding that this is the green that I always grab because I just don't love all the other greens. So I'm hoping for some more variations of this tone so I don't have to necessarily mix my own every time off of this base. And similarly with the browns, they have a couple nice browns, but they don't have, at least I find, they don't have a really nice neutral brown. All of the browns that they have some green or red undertones to them, which again is fine if that's what you're looking for, but sometimes you want a nice neutral base to work off of to either mix your own color or just to have. So I didn't see the second half of your question. I kind of answered it with that Ardennes green. I really do love that green. I just wish there was more. The colors of theirs that I really love, that I find myself wanting to use a lot. That Ardennes green is great. I really like their... the Abyssal Blue is going to be really hard to see. It's going to look black or dark gray, but they got these kind of almost like ocean blue colors that just have a really, really nice tone to them. So the Bering Blue, the Caspian Blue, the Abyssal Blue, kind of working these three together. I really like the tones of theirs. So I would say those are great. And similarly, kind of a little bit more bluish than that line there. Adriatic Blue is also really nice. It doesn't look like that. That looks really blue. It has more green in it when you see it in person. It's doing auto white balancing probably and taking some of the green out. But so those blues are really pretty. I use this to glaze into some shadows when I want to create some weathering. This is like really nice patina for like copper or brass if you're trying to do a patina. So I love those. In terms of the browns, I do really like their brown leather. Again, it might be kind of hard to see exactly what this looks like, but this is a nice slightly red brown. I use this as a base for a lot of my browns now. I do like that. I really love... They've got a really nice set of reds. I like their red colors in general, but this color here, Ryla Gray, again, probably kind of just hard to see, but I use this for all my tattoos now. I, over the years, spent a lot of time trying to mix up like colors for tattoos and try to get something that looked realistic and the right tone, and I just never really could find something consistently. This one right out of the pot, I don't even mix it with anything. This is what I use for all my tattoos now, and I really like it. I've had a lot of people tell me when they look at the pictures and they say, this looks exactly like the tattoos on my arms that I've had for 20 years, and they've started to sort of fade to a greenish black color. So I really like that. They're black, they're flat black. I'm going to show it to you, it's just going to be black. But their regular scale, the names for the blues I really liked. Their Caspian Blue is just a really pretty, like, dark sea blue. And then the Bering Blue is something you can kind of play off of that. It's sort of in the same, like if you were at a paint store and looking at the paint cards, have all the sort of blues in the same hue family. And then the dark shade for that, you might use Abyssal Blue. These kind of three go together, I think. And then the Adriatic Blue is a really pretty teal. It's kind of similar to the old Hawk Turquoise color that GW had, but maybe just a little bit different, but similar to the old Hawk Turquoise color, which I always liked. So yeah, I like those. And then the Ryla Gray, I just find I really like that for the... But in terms of, something that's different from what other paint companies have, those blues are the ones that, I just don't see anything that's really comparable in the GW range. And when I paint with them, I just really, really like the effects of those. Yeah. Like I said, I found that this Adriatic Blue is a nice replacement for Hawk Turquoise, although I don't have one to compare to it, so it could just be my memory that it looked that way, but I really do like that Adriatic Blue. They just have a really nice range of colors. I mean, Bloodfest Crimson is a nice, purplish red, which has a lot of uses. Oh, I should show you Sunset Purple. There's something about this purple that is amazing to glaze into the shadows of that Ardennes green that I really like to use. So if you look at those Ouroboros orcs that I have, they're the ones that are on my the banner on my Twitter page. This is the purple that I used to glaze into the shadows of the green. It's also really good to glaze into the shadows of browns, like for leathers and stuff, to create a little bit of coolness in the shadows. And the Showgirls models, the one with the purple and purplish blue dress, I used this with a little bit of fuchsia mixed into it. Created a really, really cool purple color. So I love the sunset purple. That's my favorite purple at the moment. I was talking about the flat black. So their basic scale colors line is very matte finished. So it dries to a really matte, like almost chalky, without actually being chalky texture. They just kind of look like the finish of chalk. Really, really nice matte finish. The Fantasy and Games line is more satin finish. So for certain purposes, that flat black is amazing because it just goes on and it dries to like a chalkboard flat finish to it. And then, varnish it and it looks fantastic when it's finished. So you can get the scale 75s in sets, which gives you a little bit cheaper cost per pot, or you can buy them single. So you can certainly get those colors that I suggested just as singles, like Ardennes green and the sunset purple and things like that. But like if you're looking for a set to order to try them out, I know I didn't complete that thought. Give me a second. I have to look something up. That's why I'm... Yeah, so the most of those blues that I was talking about, all of them except the Adriatic blue, come in their non-metallic metal paint set. So that's got the couple of colors I didn't show you, but also it's got the Caspian blue, it's got the Bering blue in it, it's got the Abyssal blue in it. So if you bought the non-metallic set, you'll get most of those blues I liked. So that's a good one to get to try a couple of their colors. If you want to try their reds, they just have a set of their reds and oranges. Yeah. In terms of the Fantasy and Games line, the Unnatural Flesh set has some of the kind of cool colors. The green and the red that come in that are pretty nice, and some of the flesh colors that come in that are kind of neat colors. So that would be one you might try with the Fantasy and Games line. Cool. So a couple things, if you do buy some, as words of advice / caution. Each of their paints, so let me grab one that I don't think that I've used before and I'll show you. There's a couple I haven't opened yet. Wow. Nope. All right, I'll just pretend. So they come and the colored metallics are supposed to be pretty good. I don't usually paint with metallic paints. I just prefer to do the non-metallic metals. It's just kind of something I did a long time ago. I preferred this sort of similar finish on my whole model, regardless of whether it was metal or cloth or anything that I got with the non-metallic. And so I've just done that ever since. And so I haven't purchased metallic paints in a really, really long time. But I've heard good things about their metallics. They also have an ink tint, or the metal and alchemy. So they have the alchemy paints, which are, I believe, more like tints as opposed to the actual metal. So you can, after you do the metallics, you can use the alchemy paints, I think, to help tint the metals and create some cool effects. So anyway, I've heard good things about them. I have not tried them, so. But when they come, the tip is actually sealed. So you can't just like open up one of these fresh, turn it over and squirt some paint down. If you do that, you're going to find nothing's coming out, and if you just keep squeezing, the lid is going to pop off and paint's going to go everywhere and it's going to be a huge mess. So you need something. I just happen to have, although not on my table at the moment, because I just moved all my stuff. Let me grab it. So I have this from a sculpting set. Like, it just has a whole bunch of like clay sculpting tools and things, but some of the tools that are there is just basically a big point. And so you need something like this to pierce the lid before you can start using it. So make sure you do that before you start trying to squeeze and then squirt paint everywhere. The other thing is that, especially the classic line, so their normal scale paints, they separate quite a bit and need a lot of shaking. So agitators help in these a lot. And I actually bought a mechanical paint shaker. It's a nail polish shaker, but it shakes paints really well because these paints really need a lot of shaking. Well, I don't know if you had to run out then. I hope you come back. Well, when you come back, I'll remind you to maybe go back and listen to the part if you missed some of that, because I think it's really good advice. Not to, being as humble as I can about that. I think it's good to know. All right, what are we ready to do? case you can't tell, what I'm doing now is I'm looking through my pile of inspirational pictures, line drawings I've printed off in the past. Try to find something to do for her tattoos. Because if there's one thing that I like to do, it's to freehand any chance I get. So let's do some freehand on her. I think I'm going to do this on her left arm. Something like this. And we'll see if the caffeine is worn off enough that I don't completely ruin everything. Now the reason we haven't done any of the shading yet, we haven't done any of the toning on the skin yet, but this is the point when I like to start actually doing the tattoos, because you generally don't really want to highlight tattoos the same way you would highlight like cloth or skin or anything like that. They just don't really necessarily behave exactly the same way. So what I want to do is I want to get the tattoos on there before I end up putting several passes of like shading and toning on here, so then as you do those other coats, it starts to help those tattoos fade back into the skin so they look like they're subcutaneous, like tattoos are, as opposed to something that's painted on top of the skin like war paint. So we use our Ryla Gray, which is a cool, really dark, actually kind of reminds me of P3 Coal Black, to be honest. I've never used that for tattoos, but I wonder how close those are. Let me look. I have it around here somewhere. P3 Coal Black looks a little bit darker, but kind of a similar, yeah, when I put it on my paper, similar type color, but just a little bit darker. Alright, so I'm going to define, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to define where the wings are going to end. kind of want those to be up here pretty high on her shoulder. Just some very, I don't even know how well you can see that. I just put very, very, very light dots. I don't want too much. These are just guidelines for me. They come down and they're just slightly outside. That's about halfway down where the tattoo is. We're going to do that. Around the base of her shoulder. Come back in and they end roughly where they started in terms of side to side. Hey, Mr. Heath. Catch you up to speed. We had a vote of 1 person to 0 that we were going to keep working on our Allie, the last survivor model tonight, as opposed to working on the showgirls. So what I did was I went through, I did 2 more highlight layering passes, make her look even more washed out and ghoulish. She looks really, really creepy at the moment, but we're going to fix that later. But before I go and do any more passes on the skin to start toning it, putting in the shades, make her look like a real human, I'm actually painting some tattoos on her. Yeah, so we got all the way up to the highlights. I'm painting tattoos on her because when I do those other passes of the flesh tone, I want those to go over top the tattoos, start sinking them down below the surface so that they look like they are subcutaneous, like tattoos are, rather than something like war paint that gets painted on top of somebody's skin. So right now, I went through my pile of inspirational line art that I've printed off for tattoos. So I'm going to try to do something like this on her left shoulder. So I'm just kind of placing some dots to give me some guidelines to painting this. So I measured out where these are going to be, these points, and these points. And I'm going to kind of fill in from there now. We're using Ryla Gray from the Scale 75 Fantasy and Games line. As I was saying earlier, I had a little too much coffee this afternoon, so we'll see how steady my hands are tonight. I might just muck all this up. mess that up. But if you're quick, get a little water on your paintbrush, you can fix mistakes. The stuff that you just painted will come off easier than the other stuff. So if you rub just hard enough, you'll just get the thing you just painted and nothing below it, because it still hasn't fully set. You know, the tricky thing when you're doing stuff like this that you're trying to make look symmetric, it's always easier in one direction than the other. Just the natural way your hands move, you'll find one direction is easier. And that's, you know, when you see something that's really well painted symmetrically freehand on a model, just that should be the thing that you marvel at, is just not necessarily the detail itself, but the ability to make it symmetric is quite challenging. Alright, so we got that outlined. We're going to do the head now. I really want to take off most of the paint on the brush. So I'm just tapping the tip on a paper towel and letting it absorb. It can help. I mean, I'll sometimes do that, but you know, the contours go differently than, and you're still painting, like if you're trying to paint the curve, like if you want it more curved on one end rather than on the other end, like you're still doing a slightly different motion coming at it from both sides. It's just tricky. It's hard to make things symmetric. You also can't do, or it's harder to do things that you might do if you're drawing. So, you know, if you see people who do a lot of cartooning, you know, they sketch a lot of shapes in, and then they kind of sketch into those shapes and then darken things to make their final product. So, you know, they'll make a square or a rectangle or something like that to then make sure they get everything nice. It's harder to do that on the model, because if you've already done like what we've done and laid down all the flesh tone, if I try to sketch in there with my paint color, I have to go back and paint over all of the sketch that I do, which is not as easy as just taking a eraser and erasing your pencil lines, or doing a scan and only picking up like a digital scan and having it set to only pick up the dark lines. Hey, 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 Cass. So I had, if you showed up tonight, I was going to show you something really cool. I'm sorry you can't get the, well, I shouldn't get your hopes up. It's not that cool, but I was just going to show you something. But if you can't see what I'm doing, I appreciate you stopping by. The brush I'm using right now, Heath, is the infamous 000 from Winsor & Newton 7 series. Quite a fine tip, just for scale purposes. That's how large it is. Doesn't hold, it's got a very nice tip to it, doesn't hold too much paint, which this is one of those cases where, like I've said before, you can paint detail work with even like a size 1 brush if it has a nice tip to it. But the tricky thing is the larger the head, the more paint it holds. And for tiny little detail work like this, you always run the risk of having it release more paint than you want it to. So I like to use these smaller brushes, and it really only holds enough paint for me to do a couple lines, but that's okay. In doing freehand, patience is really important. Nice. Well, I hope you get a good one. I think, like I said on my previous stream, when you order things online, you can't see them in person. Every so often, you get one that has a little stray bristle or something and makes it so it doesn't work quite as well. Winsor & Newton's pretty good. You should be fine. But I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with your 000 and also taunting Josh because you have one and he doesn't. Are you still working on that that female elf warrior that you were working on before, Cass, or did you move on to a different mini? Well, that's awesome to hear. You'll keep getting better really quick if you are committed to it and focused on taking your time. Look forward to seeing it. So the focus, I think, is a little better than the last time I streamed. I think you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. However, the focal point, I've turned off the autofocus, so I've got the focal depth fixed to down here. So I don't think if I bring it up to the camera, you can really see all that clearly, but I'll take pictures tonight of how this thing looks up close. But yeah, Heath, taking your time. I actually talked to Josh last night on Google Hangouts. We were talking about some things, and we were testing out syncing up our streams so that I can paint on his show. And we were joking that we could get both of us on camera at the same time and we could have a race about who finishes their miniature first. And he said that he would win. And I agreed. Because as I mentioned last time, I am a slow painter. That is also true, Heath. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, there's for anyone who does any kind of art or creativity at all, whether you're an author or a painter or whatever, you could always keep tweaking. And there just becomes a point where you just have to say, it's done, and walk away. There's that quote, something like, art is never finished, it's just abandoned. So some miniature painters use the phrase finished, not perfect, to remind themselves that they don't have